Please be seated. Good morning. I'm very honored to be here this morning to speak with all of you. Millbrook's been a very special place for my wife and I. We were married here 5 years ago down the road, albeit in a pagan ceremony in the woods, with lots of my fellow ballet dancers, friends, including Claire and Chris, were there. And for the past 5 years as well, my ballet company, Ballet Collective, has been coming here every summer to create new ballets at the Millbrook School. So we've been coming here for 5 years. It's been really wonderful to get to know all sorts of members of the community and to feel embraced here. And I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about choreography, collaboration, and using perspective to inspire us into the future. So choreography is a very unique art form in the sense that it takes a lot of people and a lot of ideas to make it possible. A lot of art forms, we can think of the solitary artist in his studio, writing on paper, crumpling it up, throwing it away, the painter slashing her canvases, the playwright. There's a lot of opportunities to focus by yourself and create. Well, dance is not that. It's a communal form. It takes a wonderful space like we have in Millbrook, a group of dancers. It takes music, a concept, and of course, an audience to exist. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can go about creating choreography. And in some ways, one of the most simplest would be to take a piece of music that you really love and have listened to 100 times and create a dance to it. You know the music, you know where you're going, you know what it can be. But there's also a second way, which is to create something that's never existed before, that's really entirely new. But to do that, you can't do it by yourself unless you happen to be both a great choreographer and a great composer at the same time and have two voices in your head. But you can find other people to work with. And one of the joys of collaborating is that you have no idea where you're going to go. You can't dictate anything. It's just like doing anything with somebody else. You don't know exactly what that experience is going to be until you go forward within it. And I find that to be one of the most satisfying, fulfilling ways to work, because that's exactly what my form is all about. It's about collaborating with dancers, but it's also about collaborating with music. So we can come together, talk about ideas that are important to us, and find common ground, and move forward. And all these art forms have been around for hundreds, some of them thousands of years. We've always been dancing. So to find those new pathways, you can't, no one person has all the best ideas themselves. So that's basically what we do at Ballet Collective. We invite artists working in all sorts of forms together to provide input across genre and across discipline in order to spark new ideas in our pathways going forward artistically. And this whole idea for this company actually started when I learned the story of a seminal work of music and dance from the 20th century called Agon. And Agon was a collaboration between George Balanchine and Igor Stravinsky in the 1950s. Now, you have these two creators, Igor Stravinsky, the wonderful composer of Petrushka, The Rite of Spring, The Firebird, and George Balanchine, who basically brought ballet to America, one of the best choreographers of all time. And they had collaborated together a few times on narrative works, right? When you're working with, as a choreographer with a composer, one of the most obvious things to do is to take a story that you know and create a musical version and a dance version of it. But what if there's really no story attached to it? How do you go forward and how do you collaborate effectively? And one of the things that is so fascinating about each art form is that we all use very similar words to describe drastically different things. So I could be talking about one concept, and I think I know exactly what it is, but for the composer, those same words mean something completely different. But it's very easy for two people to look at one thing and talk about what they like inside of it. So George Balanchine and Igor Stravinsky were working to collaborate on a new piece. And they didn't want to use a story, but they knew they wanted it to be grounded in concept. So they combined two opposing ideas, mixed them together, and turned them on their heads, basically. So they took a 17th century French court dancing manual and the Greek idea of a contest or competition. And what's even more fascinating about this work of art is that they somewhat started with the idea of who was in the audience. Now, that's a very different way to try to create something, right? Because it can very easily be like you're pandering to the audience, giving people what they want all the time. Whereas artists, we're always trying to be challenging audiences and trying to find new ways of doing things. So George Balanchine and Igor Stravinsky came up with this great idea that the dancers were performing for the audience, but the audience was actually filled entirely with Greek classical sculpture inside. So it was an audience of stone, no critics, no applause, just the dance and the music competing against one another to create something. And mixing in French court dancing, which has all of its own musical structures and concepts and dance steps, those two things don't necessarily go together, ancient Greece and Louis XIV style dancing. But they abstracted these ideas out of context, and they reinvented them. And in doing so, it forced both of them to both create something together that they had no idea what it was. So it took a really free-spirited collaboration and a willingness to go wherever the art took them. And the result of this project is not only one of the most valuable works of music and dance of the 20th century, it also provided enormous benefits to both of its creators. So it's great that it created a wonderful ballet, but I think also you have these two geniuses at that moment. If they had never created another work for the rest of their lives, we would still be talking about them today. Balanchine was in his 50s, Stravinsky was in his 70s. And at this moment of collaborative spark, it gave them new drive into the later years of their careers. So Stravinsky all of a sudden felt energized to move forward in a new choreographic style, and George Balanchine also was able to create many new choreographic ideas and styles and steps. So as a young student, and when I was a young dancer at the New York City Ballet, I was always very surprised that if this wonderful collaborative process did all of this, why weren't we trying this all of the time, right? It seems like a really fascinating way to work and to collaborate, to take a choreographer and a composer, put them together, but then use a source, use something that grounds the collaboration artistically and serves as a jumping off point. So in Agon, they could have gone 100 different ways with French court dancing and Greek contest. But at that time and at that moment, it went this one way. So in starting Ballet Collective, I thought it would be really fascinating for both emerging and established creators to come together and talk about ideas that could move their art forms forward. But rather than looking to the past in ancient Greece, while looking to the past can be a really wonderful way of moving forward, looking to the present can also be. So I had the idea to commission living artists who we thought were really saying something interesting to collaborate with us. So it provides this rare opportunity for artists to just openly converse about something. We know that we want to create a ballet, but each of us is able to go around and talk about where we are and where we think we want to go, and to find that common ground and to form a community that way that is based on just creating this one small project. So we have been doing this for several years, and we are currently up here working right now. And so the last thing I want to talk to you about is how this process relates to perspective. And one thing that I learned about recently is something called the overview effect, which is a cognitive shift that's been reported by astronauts who have gone into space and have looked out the window of their spaceship and seen our planet. And what a mind-blowing thing that must be to look out the window and to see the entirety of everything that we know and have ever known in this little ball, right? I think we've all seen pictures of our planet, but we've never experienced that unless there are any astronauts in this room. No? Okay. But when you think about that, and they're looking out and they see this small little band of all of the air, and that's everything that we breathe, and it's so small. And when they come back to Earth, their perspective has just been blown, right? Because they've seen kind of everything at once. And I thought that would be such an interesting thing for groups of artists to explore, because we're, as creators, each of these forms has their techniques, right? And we're so focused on the minutia. And I think like in life, where it's so easy to be so in depth with these little tiny details. And kind of like in Agon, where they started like with the audience as these stone statues, I thought it could be really interesting for us to start really zoomed out and to think about our planet as a source of inspiration in the abstract. One thing that if you've ever seen artists who focus on this is that when you look at our planet from very far away, but almost cropped like a picture, it looks like abstract art. You really don't understand what you're looking at, and our concept of scale can be really thrown off in a great way. And because when you look at a normal picture of our planet, a landscape or something, you see the stream, you see the trees. But what if you zoom out a couple miles and you're looking at a place that people don't even exist in? So that's where we started this year, and working together and working with artists who are focusing on this idea of looking at things from very far away, which is the complete opposite, I think, from the way a lot of artists work, but it's been sort of a very valuable experience. I feel like, because when you're creating something, it's really good to look at the big picture before you start. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.